As Donald Trump's cognitive decline continues, there are fewer and fewer things that he is aware of, but one of them is the fact of just how unpopular he is. Donald Trump knows his approval rating is tanking, knows his domestic agenda is the least popular in modern American history, and knows that the Epstein scandal isn't going away. He feels his back up against the wall, and when that is the case, he takes those tiny little fingers of his to Truth Social, and that is what we just saw in a 3 a.m. meltdown where Donald Trump went after his favorite target, the media. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into Trump's insane threats against the media and liberal host, I want to start with one who is perpetually infuriating him. That is Rachel Maddow right here.
Trump isn't announcing any firings, right? Everybody just gets to be an ambassador to something when they get pushed out in this term. But in the military and national security part of the U.S. government, if you watch what they're actually doing, it is really starting to look like mass firings of everyone with any kind of standing, everyone of consequence. I mean, Trump's people didn't just fire all of the senior lawyers in the U.S. military. They fired or pushed out the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Second in Command of the Air Force, the Commandant of the Coast Guard, the Chief of Naval Operations, the Deputy Head of the NSA, the Head of the NSA and the Head of Cyber Command, the Chair of the National Intelligence Council. Now, just recently on Friday, they fired the Head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Chief of the U.S. Navy Reserve, and also the Head of the Navy SEALs. The SEAL officer who oversees Naval Special Warfare Command, the former commander of SEAL Team 8, all fired. How come? And this comes on top of the evisceration of the National Security Division of the Department of Justice and the wholesale reassignment or removal of the FBI's National Security Core operations. And so how do you cover that, right? You could try to follow the ball on any one of those firings or reassignments or unit shutdowns. Right? Oh, what did Trump say about why that person needed to be fired? What was said in MAGA world about why that person needed to be fired? What could have explained how this person ended up on the wrong side of the black ball here? I mean, you could try to follow the individual story of all of these firings and reassignments and unit shutdowns, the way we can try to discern the story behind any of Trump's newly announced ambassadors as they one by one are expelled from some government agency or the White House or from a romantic relationship with one of the president's adult children. And you can follow these stories one by one. Or you can look at the big picture and recognize that what's happening here might be quite important, particularly in the national security sphere. Right? At the same time, the president is repurposing all federal law enforcement agencies and the U.S. military into an armed force, in some cases a masked armed force that patrols and polices and occupies U.S. cities. He is simultaneously degrading the professional core of those entities, degrading the professional core of federal law enforcement, the military, the intelligence agencies, and even emergency response. He is deprofessionalizing the U.S. military and federal law enforcement and federal emergency response, while he is turning those kinds of forces against the American people on American soil. And why would you do that? I mean, maybe somebody should ask him, although would you believe his answer? I can say if this were happening in any other country, what we would know instinctively was that the reason a leader would do something like that is because that leader wants to use those forces differently than what they've been trained for, differently than what they've been used for before. A leader trying to deprofessionalize the sharp end of the spear, deprofessionalizing law enforcement and the military, does so because he wants to remove any professional restraint or internal ethics or culture that might otherwise hold those forces back from what he is now going to ask them to do.
Every action that this administration takes is purposeful. They are not smarts, but ultimately they are trying to break our government down. It's what Russ Vaught said, that he wants federal workers to feel traumatized. And that's not just people who work for the federal government. That is our collective view of the federal government. Donald Trump wants to break it down, sell it off, and then take it for his own, which is also what he wants to do with the media, as made very clear by this rant right here. Trump calls for crooked ABC and NBC to be terminated in epic late-night rant. Why is it that ABC and NBC fake news, two of the absolute worst and most biased networks anywhere in the world, aren't paying millions of dollars a year in license fees, Trump ranted. They should lose their licenses for their unfair coverage of Republicans and or conservatives, Trump continued. But at a minimum, they should pay up big for having the privilege of using the most valuable airwaves anywhere at any time. Crooked journalism should not be reported, it should be terminated. The outburst followed Trump talking himself up, stating, despite a very high popularity, according to many, among the greatest 8 months in presidential history, ABC and NBC fake news, two of the worst and most biased networks in history, give me 97% bad stories. The president continues, if that is the case, they are simply an arm of the Democrat Party and should, according to many, have their licenses revoked by the FCC. I would be totally in favor of that because they are so biased and untruthful, an actual threat to our democracy. MAGA. We truthfully have a mobster president. That is how Donald Trump acts. That is how he wants to intimidate. But let's just take a closer look at what Donald Trump is saying right now. That the media is far too biased towards the Democrats, that it's simply an extension of him. Do we remember when Sean Hannity bragged on air about how he was never going to talk about the Epstein files again and that he was going to silence it? That's what propaganda looks like. Before Midas Touch was on the scene, the top 10 podcasts, mind you, Pod Save America, were conservative leaning. The biggest cable network is Fox. Elon Musk owns Twitter. Mark Zuckerberg is willing to sell us out for $1 to Trump. TikTok bended the knee to Donald as well. The media is completely dominated by the right and funded very well by billionaires who want to support the messaging apparatus that gets them bigger tax cuts. Do not tell me that there is a liberal media bias. That is not the case. That is why it is so important for us to have independent media. That is why it is so important for us to build our own platforms that aren't funded by billionaires, because we actually have real thoughts that we want to share. We don't just want to shill for the ultra-rich. But that seems like the only thing conservatives want, and it's the way Donald Trump has built his administration. Because of that, he's surrounded by idiots. And Rachel Maddow broke it all down right here.
The president has just fired the director of presidential personnel at the White House, the person in charge of hiring people into the Trump administration. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said he fired him. He actually named him to be an ambassador. Because in this second presidential term, Trump doesn't fire anyone anymore. When he wants to fire someone, he instead just makes them an ambassador. And it's always because of some kind of mess. Trump's national security advisor, you'll remember, he bizarrely added the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine onto an insane group text about classified forthcoming military operations. Michael Waltz, Trump national security advisor, did not get fired for that. He instead was named ambassador to the United Nations. Trump apparently wanted to get rid of the U.S. attorney in New Jersey so he could give a big New Jersey job to his former personal defense lawyer, whose other legal experience was mostly just working for a parking garage company. Well, okay, in that case, you're going to need to get rid of the existing U.S. attorney in New Jersey. So voila, that existing U.S. attorney in New Jersey will now be the ambassador to Namibia. Sure, why not? The president's son, Donald Trump Jr., appears to be no longer dating the Fox News personality Kimberly Guilfoyle. Well, congratulations, Kimberly Guilfoyle. That means it's time for you to be named ambassador to Greece. The president's inexplicable IRS commissioner choice, Billy Long, a professional cattle auctioneer by trade, he astonishingly got confirmed by the United States Senate to lead the IRS, whereupon he arrived at the IRS and there was a sudden widespread revelation, oh my God, this man cannot lead the IRS. So now, voila, Billy Long is named the new ambassador to Iceland. This is what happens. You don't get fired. You become the ambassador to some country that doesn't deserve it. And now we have this latest one. Sergio Gore, the head of presidential personnel at the White House, He is credited by the administration with vetting and hiring something like 4,000 people into this administration. And boy, have they vetted and picked some winners. We don't know why Sergio Gore has suddenly been pushed out as the White House personnel director. They've announced that he's going to be ambassador to India now for some reason, but this follows a bizarre series of reports in the right-wing pro-Trump tabloid, The New York Post. Reports in which the Post claimed that Sergio Gore's real name was Sergio Gorokovsky, that he claimed to have been born in Malta, but that he had not actually been born in Malta. He had been born in Soviet Uzbekistan. And, again, the New York Post claiming that while Mr. Gore himself was supposedly responsible for background checks and security checks on all hires into the Trump administration, the Post reported that he himself for months had refused to fill out the paperwork to allow a background check on himself, which meant that he had only been able to get, reportedly, a temporary security clearance, and then that reportedly had expired. After the New York Post published its report on Mr. Gore in June, they said he finally did submit his SF-86 form to start his background check months late. And then, according to the Post, quote, several sources said that the FBI recently completed a background check into Mr. Gore. The findings of that review stoked internal intrigue over the past week as those findings were, quote, reviewed by West Wing bosses. And now he's been fired. I'm sorry, I mean, named ambassador.
I think at a time in which Trump so desperately wanted to stress his desire for competence across the government and that we were getting rid of DEI and it was going to be a meritocracy, we really should talk about how incapable these people are of doing their job and the real tangible effects it has on you. Talk about the fact that they don't want government to work because when it doesn't, then they can privatize it. Do you think Republicans want Social Security privatized, not only because they don't give a shit about you, but because their billionaire buddies know that they can make big bucks off of it? Yeah, that's why they want to break up these public goods. That's what the oligarchs love. When government falls apart, when it's focused on scaring people, then Peter Thiel gets a big contract for Palantir to surveil us all. Private prison owners get shit rich, jailing us all. If you dissent against the dear leader, yeah, they love this stuff. Of course they do. So let's call it out. We're certainly going to be on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.